He couldn't move. His legs were shredded, his uniform soaked with blood, and his machine gun barrel glowed red from non-stop fire. The jungle around him burned with tracer fire and screams. 1,000 shadows rushing up the hill, one after another. Everyone else was dead. His friends, his commander, the men he had eaten breakfast with that morning, gone. Only one man remained behind the gun, and for the next several hours, Corporal Anthony Casamento, half-conscious, alone, and broken, would hold his position against an entire Japanese battalion. He wasn't fighting to win anymore. He was fighting to make sure his men didn't die for nothing. This is the forgotten story of one Marine who turned a small hill on Guadalcanal into a place the enemy would never forget. A story of blood, madness, and impossible courage, when one man refused to surrender a single inch of ground. What you're about to hear is more than history. It's memory carved in blood and courage. Subscribe to join us as we bring their untold stories to life, one battle, one voice, one heartbeat at a time. August 1942. The Pacific War has reached its breaking point. The ocean that once carried empires now carries wreckage. Burning ships, lifeless bodies, the remnants of battles lost and forgotten. For the first time since Pearl Harbor, American forces are not retreating. They have landed on a patch of earth few could point to on a map, Guadalcanal, a jungle island buried deep in the Solomon Chain. The air here is heavy and damp, thick with rot and mosquitoes. The Marines who came ashore expected a swift fight. Instead, they found an island that eats men alive. Every footstep sinks in mud. Every shadow feels like an ambush. The Japanese hold the surrounding seas and skies, leaving the Marines cut off, hungry, and surrounded. Among them is Corporal Anthony Casamento, 22 years old, a machine gunner from the Bronx. He has never seen a jungle before this, never seen an enemy up close. Now he crouches on a ridge the Marines call Edson's Ridge, a rise of red soil and broken trees overlooking the dark, endless green below. The men call it the line. If this hill falls, the island falls with it. Days melt together. Rain pours without mercy, drenching ammunition and skin alike. At night the enemy prowls through the trees, shouting insults and false commands in English to lure the Marines into firing early. Sometimes they mimic the cries of wounded men. Sometimes they scream for hours without attacking, just to make sleep impossible. The veterans call these the Nights of Whispers. Casamento doesn't scare easily, but the nights begin to grind him down. He keeps his Browning machine gun clean, always loaded, always within reach. Each morning, he counts the men still alive. Each evening, he counts again, and the number is smaller. Malaria spreads faster than bullets. Dysentery claims the rest. Their food rations rot in the humidity, and water comes from puddles slick with oil. He writes to his mother once, pressing the paper against his knee in the flickering light of a dying candle. The letter is short. Mom, tell them we're still here. Tell them I'm still standing. As October fades, the tension on the ridge thickens. The Marines can feel something building, a presence just beyond the trees, waiting. Scouts bring back whispers of a massive Japanese force assembling for an assault. Some say 1,000, others say 3 times that. No one knows for sure. On November 1st, the sun sets behind a curtain of rain. The sky turns black without warning. Casamento checks his gun one last time. The air is so still it feels like the jungle itself is holding its breath. Then, without warning, the frogs go silent. The wind stops. Even the insects vanish. In that vacuum, a deep vibration rolls through the soil. At first it sounds like distant thunder. Then it grows louder, rhythmic, alive. Footsteps. Hundreds, then thousands. From the darkness, shapes emerge. Bayonets glint. Helmets shimmer in flashes of lightning. The sound becomes a roar. Men shouting, chanting, crying out in one voice that drowns the rain and the sea. Casamento steadies his grip. What comes up that hill is not a skirmish. It's an army. 2,500 Japanese soldiers are advancing toward a handful of Marines. He exhales slowly, sights down his barrel, and waits for the first muzzle flash to pierce the night. The battle for the ridge, and for his life, is about to begin. The first shell lands short, a flash of orange tearing through the undergrowth. Then the world ignites. Mortars scream overhead, hammering the ridge like an earthquake. Soil and shrapnel rain down in a deafening storm. Palm trunks snap apart, spraying splinters across the gun pits. The air turns to smoke and flame. Casamento ducks behind his weapon, mouth full of dirt, eyes burning. The concussion of each blast slams into his chest like a drumbeat. His ears ring, but through the haze he hears what every Marine fears most, the shrill, rising roar of men charging uphill. He pulls the trigger. The Browning erupts, spitting fire into the darkness. A solid stream of tracers cuts through the jungle, painting fleeting silhouettes. Helmets, rifles, bodies collapsing mid-stride. The enemy keeps coming. Hundreds of figures surge through the smoke, tripping over the fallen, screaming as they climb. Casamento changes belts without looking. The feed jams, he clears it, keeps firing. The barrel glows red, hissing as rain strikes it. Beside him, his loader slams a fresh box into place, then jerks backward, skull shattered by a bullet. Casamento doesn't flinch. He drags the corpse aside, reloads himself, and keeps the gun talking. All along the ridge, the line buckles under pressure. The ground is a chaos of muzzle flashes, flares, and broken cries. Casamento hears men shouting for medics, for ammunition, for God. He doesn't look up. Every second his gun is silent. Another enemy climbs closer. A grenade lands just beyond the sandbags. He kicks it away. The explosion lifts him from the ground, shrapnel slicing across his cheek and shoulder. Blood runs into his eye, blurring the sights. He wipes it away with a muddy sleeve and keeps firing. The slope below is littered with bodies, but more fill the gaps. The Japanese push forward with chilling resolve, crawling through fire and smoke. Okay, as if death itself cannot stop them. Casamento can see their faces now, wild, determined, illuminated by burning palms. He feels a sudden stab of pain in his arm. Another round punches into his thigh. The impacts barely register. He braces the tripod against the recoil, plants his boots into the mud, and squeezes the trigger until the mechanism locks open. Steam coils from the barrel. The lieutenant's voice cuts through the chaos. Fall back! Fall back to the second line! Casamento glances behind him. The ridge is a ruin. Craters, scattered weapons, motionless silhouettes. The wounded are crawling, dragging themselves through the mud. If he leaves now, the slope will be theirs within minutes. They'll pour over the crest, finish the survivors, and break through to the field hospital below. He doesn't need orders. He knows what has to be done. Casamento rips open another ammo box, slams the cover shut, and resets the tripod. His hands tremble from exhaustion, but he forces them steady. He presses his body behind the gun, sights down the hill, and exhales. The next wave is already climbing. He pulls the trigger and meets them head-on. The ridge disappears beneath fire and thunder once again. The first light of dawn creeps over Guadalcanal, dim and gray through the drifting smoke. The jungle below the ridge lies in ruin, a graveyard of trees and men. The air reeks of burnt powder and decay. Casamento stirs, barely conscious. His uniform is stiff with blood, his arms trembling uncontrollably. Around him, silence. No voices, no movement. The men who had fought beside him hours earlier are gone, torn apart, lifeless, unrecognizable. He is the last one breathing on the ridge. The machine gun sits beside him, caked in mud and gore. He forces the bolt open with a rock, scrapes out the jammed cartridge, and feeds in a fresh belt with trembling hands. The metal cuts his fingers, but pain has lost its meaning. He drags the ammunition across the ground, through puddles, over the sprawled bodies of his squad. Each motion feels heavier than the last, but he refuses to stop. Below him, faint movement stirs in the jungle. He squints through blood-blurred eyes. Hundreds of shapes gather in the trees, ranks reforming, banners rising. The Japanese are regrouping. The night's slaughter wasn't enough. They're preparing for one final assault. Casamento breathes slowly, forcing air into lungs that feel like they're on fire. He wipes his face, smearing blood into mud. and steadies himself behind the gun. He can barely see, his vision tunneling in and out, but he knows where the enemy will come from. They always come from the same path, the one covered in bodies. He checks the ammo again. 1 full belt, a few loose rounds, 2 grenades, that's all. He knows he's not leaving this hill alive, but as long as he draws breath, no one passes. The jungle erupts. A horn blares, a guttural cry rising from hundreds of throats. The sound builds like a storm. Then they emerge with wave after wave, screaming, charging up the slope through the smoke and corpses. Casamento grips the handles and squeezes. The Browning spits fire once more. The first line of attackers collapses instantly, mowed down before reaching halfway. He shifts his aim, cuts through the next line. Brass shells pile around him, hot against his legs. Bullets whip past his head, slicing through leaves and bark. One rips through his shoulder, spinning him sideways. He gasps, braces himself, and drags the weapon back into position. Another round catches his side. Still, he fires. Still, he fights. The slope turns into chaos, blood and smoke twisting together, the screams of the dying echoing up through the rising heat. The gun barrel smokes again, but he doesn't stop to cool it. He fires until the trigger locks back and the barrel clicks empty. Casamento dives for his rifle, finds it buried in the mud. He loads, fires once, twice, jam. He slams the bolt open, ejects the shell, fires again. The rifle cracks dry. He throws it aside, grabs a grenade, pulls the pin with his teeth, and hurls it downhill. The explosion throws dirt and limbs into the air. He grabs the last grenade and sends it after the first. The charging voices falter. Then, one by one, they stop. The jungle quiets again, leaving only the soft hiss of burning trees and the ringing in his ears. Casamento lowers his head. His weapon smokes in front of him, the metal warped and dull. He can't tell how long he's been firing. Minutes, hours, a lifetime. His breath rasps shallowly, his strength gone. He looks down the hill. The ground is unrecognizable, a blackened field covered in twisted bodies. The Japanese assault has been broken. Against every expectation, one wounded Marine has held the line. He exhales once, slow and final. The ridge is silent now, except for the distant rumble of thunder rolling across the sea. Casamento closes his eyes, his hands still resting on the gun that refused to die. He had done it. He had popped them all. The world drifts in and out of silence. Smoke curls across the ridge, mixing with the heavy stench of blood and gunpowder. Casamento lies where he fell, his body half buried in mud, the machine gun still clutched against his chest. His skin is cold, his breath faint, his pulse barely there. The battle is over, but the jungle has yet to notice. It hums with flies, the low buzz of victory and decay. Hours pass before the sound of boots crunching through the debris breaks the stillness. A Marine patrol moves cautiously up the slope, rifles raised, eyes scanning the devastation. They expect no survivors. The ridge looks like the end of the world. Craters, charred roots, a carpet of broken bodies. One of the Marines kneels beside Casamento, nudging him gently. "Poor bastard," he mutters. "He's still holding the gun." Then a whisper, raspy, barely audible. "Don't touch it." The men freeze. They stare down at the blood-soaked figure whose hands refuse to release the weapon. His fingers are locked around the trigger, muscles frozen in rigor. For a moment no one speaks. Then the medic shouts, "He's alive!" They pry the gun from his grip with care, afraid to break him. His right arm hangs at an unnatural angle. The left is shredded from wrist to shoulder. His legs are torn open, and one eye is swollen shut. Yet somehow he's breathing. Shallow, irregular, but alive. Two Marines lift him onto a stretcher made from ponchos and bamboo poles. As they carry him down the hill, the path that had swallowed hundreds feels eerily quiet. The trees, stripped bare by gunfire, lean like ghosts watching their descent. Casamento's head lolls to the side. He catches brief flashes of light through the canopy before everything fades to black again. He regains consciousness days later in a field hospital near the coast. The sound of waves replaces the thunder of gunfire. His body is rapid and in bandages from neck to ankle. A nurse tells him he's lucky to be alive. He doesn't believe her. Soon after, he's transferred to a hospital ship anchored off the island. The air smells of disinfectant and salt, white ceilings, metal corridors. The war feels far away now, but the noise inside his head never stops. The hammering gunfire, the screams, the endless charging voices. Doctors crowd around his bed, reading through reports. 14 wounds. Blood loss that should have killed him 10 times over. One of them tells him he'll never walk properly again. He just nods, eyes fixed on the porthole beside him. Beyond the glass, the ocean rolls endlessly under a red dawn. He doesn't speak of the ridge. Not to the nurses, not to the officers who visit to shake his hand. He doesn't need to. The men who were there, what's left of them, already know. Weeks later, word reaches the front lines that the Japanese have finally withdrawn. Guadalcanal is secured. The ridge Casamento defended, once just another patch of dirt, becomes a symbol. A place whispered about in foxholes and mess tents, proof of what one man can endure when everything else is gone. But time moves forward. New battles rise. New heroes take the spotlight. Casamento's name fades quietly into the margins of history, buried beneath the noise of greater wars. He doesn't mind. He knows what happened on that hill. He knows what it cost. And that's enough. Nearly 4 decades pass before anyone looks closely at the forgotten files buried in a dusty cabinet at the Department of the Navy. Pages yellowed with time, typed in fading ink, tell of a small ridge on Guadalcanal and a lone corporal who refused to abandon his post. The language is clinical, stripped of emotion. Enemy assault repelled, position held, heavy casualties sustained. Yet between the lines lies a story no medal ever marked. In 1980, a junior officer reviewing historical citations stumbles across the report. The details catch his eye. 1 Marine, 14 wounds, a single machine gun, an entire enemy battalion stopped cold. He checks the commendation record. Nothing. No Silver Star, no Distinguished Service Cross, not even a mention. The officer sends a letter, then another. The paper trail grows until it reaches the Pentagon. What begins as a formality becomes a revelation. Witnesses from the battle, now old men scattered across the country, are tracked down and interviewed. Their memories converge on one name, Anthony Casamento. They describe the night he stayed behind, the sound of his gun that never stopped, the moment they realized the ridge still stood because one man refused to fall. That fall, Washington prepares for a ceremony long overdue. The morning is cold, the air sharp with the bite of early November. A small crowd gathers outside the White House, the noise of traffic distant behind the walls. Reporters shuffle papers, waiting. The honor guard lines the path, uniforms crisp, eyes fixed ahead. A van pulls up to the gate. 2 Marines step forward, open the door, and help a frail figure into a wheelchair. His hands shake slightly, but his posture remains straight, proud. His hair is white, his face weathered by time, but the eyes, steady, unblinking, are the same that stared down death on a Pacific ridge nearly 40 years earlier. Casamento is wheeled toward the podium. Cameras click. The band plays a slow march. President Jimmy Carter greets him with quiet respect, leaning down to meet his gaze. Then, with deliberate care, he lifts the Medal of Honor and places it around the veteran's neck. The applause that follows is restrained, dignified, not thunderous. Casamento bows his head slightly, the medal resting against his chest. For a brief moment the years seem to fold together, the mud, the gunfire, the screams, all giving way to this silent recognition. When the press conference begins, a reporter asks him what he remembers most from that night. Casamento pauses, eyes distant. He doesn't mention the wounds, or the fear, or the endless hours alone. He doesn't speak of the friends he lost, or the pain that still lingers every morning when he tries to stand. Instead, he says softly, "I had a job to do, and I wasn't going to leave my gun." The words hang in the air, simple, unpolished, final. After the ceremony, he's wheeled out into the sunlight. The air smells faintly of rain and cold stone. He tilts his head up toward the sky, closing his eyes for a moment. The sounds of the city fade, replaced by echoes only he can hear. The jungle, the machine gun, the cries fading into silence. History moves on, as it always does, but some stories remain, not because they were written, but because they were lived with such quiet, unyielding courage that time itself refuses to erase them. That day in Washington wasn't about glory or medals. It was about remembrance, of a hill soaked in rain and blood, of a young man who refused to retreat, and of a moment when courage meant facing the impossible alone. Anthony Casamento never called himself a hero, but history did. The hill he defended still stands on Guadalcanal, reclaimed by vines and silence, no plaques, no markers, just the whisper of wind through the trees, the only witness left to what happened there. If you stand there at dawn, the jungle feels still, but the air carries something else, a presence, a memory that refuses to die. Because courage like his doesn't fade. It echoes, through generations, through stories, through the quiet promise that some men keep when the world expects them to fall. And so ends the story of one Marine who stood alone on a hill against 2,500 enemy soldiers and never let go of his gun. This would be your visual fade-out moment. The line, "never let go of his gun," lands like a hammer, followed by a slow, somber fade into your outro text. This is WW2 FrontTales. Real stories, real courage, never forgotten. Some stories end when the guns fall silent. But the memory of those who stood their ground still speaks, through us. If this story stayed with you, share your thoughts below. Every comment, every subscription keeps their courage alive and helps bring the next untold tale to light.